In this lecture, I am going to explain how poor countries, developing countries such as Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, India, and Pakistan can print their own monies, their own currencies, to pursue rapid economic growth and development, an unprecedented one, so that they can achieve advanced status within 10 years, within 15 years, and within 20 years. Ghana, print your cedi. Nigeria, print your naira. Kenya, print your shilling. India and Pakistan, print your rupees. There is no need to borrow anymore. Poor countries need not borrow anymore. Neither should they use excessive taxation. According to World Bank data on GDP per capita, over the past 20 years, from 2000 to 2020, Ghana and South Africa have managed to increase their respective per capita income by just $2,000. Nigeria, Kenya, India, and Pakistan have even done less. Meanwhile, UK have done more than $12,000, Canada more than $19,000, Germany more than $20,000, and USA more than $27,000. Now, this is what is happening. As we speak now, the per capita income for USA as at 2020 was $63,000. Ghana and South Africa will use 20 years to get just $2,000. Then how many years are they going to use to get to USA at $63,000? It will take about 600 years. For Nigeria, Kenya, India, and Pakistan, it may even take more than 1,000 years. Now I am going to show you how you can print your own money to finance this development within 10 years, 15, 20 years. You can all catch up with UK and USA. In terms of per capita income status and economic growth and development, this is the future world economic order, an economic system that will ensure that all countries in the world grow and develop and become rich and work shoulder to shoulder. No poor country must borrow anymore. No poor country must use excessive taxation. Print your money. My name is Nuruddin Isuman Sally Brown. I am an author. When I say I am an author, these are some of my books. I am also an economist. I specialize in monetary economics, financial economics, international monetary economics. I write movie scripts, I develop economic theories and mathematical formulas, and I am a teacher too. I do not intend to speak for long, but this lecture has been divided into 6 thematic areas. Firstly, I will explain why there are so many poor countries in the world. Why since 1945, many countries in the world have not been able to develop despite so many persistent attempts. Then secondly, I will explain 2 models: workers' economic system and dual sector internal asymmetric model. I will explain decentralization of stock exchange. As the author of the model, I believe decentralizing stock exchange is the way to go. Then fourthly, I will explain revolutions. When I talk about revolutions, I'm not talking about wars. I'm talking about agricultural revolution phase 1, phase 2, industrial revolution phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, and phase 5. Then I'll talk about construction revolution phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. That will be the development agenda. Then I'll also explain pertinent issues with respect to inflation and hyperinflation, with respect to work on Milton Friedman and Philip Kagan. I just want to allay your fears that you can actually print your money to develop as quickly as possible without running into inflations and hyperinflations, as has been sold to us by the monetarists Philip Kagan and Milton Friedman. And finally, I will talk about how to plan the development agenda. You cannot just get up and print your money. You must plan ahead, sometimes 2 years, 3 years, or even 4 years. Everything can be found in a book I call Workers' Economic System and Other Models in Economics. That is it. So please listen carefully. The reason why there are so many poor countries in the world, many countries have not been able to develop since 1945, is because all these countries are pursuing Keynesian economics, Keynesian demand management policy. Meanwhile, Keynesian economics is cosmetic. Keynesian economics is cosmetic because it does not shift aggregate supply. Keynesian economics only shift aggregate demand. Even at the basic level, at high school, and at first degree, first year, they will tell you that Keynesian economics assumes that the aggregate supply is horizontal, perfectly elastic. Please, that is the reason why many countries are not developing. They are pursuing Keynesian economics. Remember, Keynesian economics started in 1930s. Why? Because of the Great Depression. But the problem with the Great Depression was not about absence of supply, nor absence of productive capacity. It was about absence of demand. That is why J.M. Keynes advocated that government must intervene, print money, and then expand the demand side of the economy, expecting the aggregate quantity supply to move along its lines. And it worked. But this does not work in poor countries because poor countries do not have the productive capacity. Anytime you ask a poor country to expand the economy, they expand the aggregate demand side of the economy, expecting the aggregate quantity supply to move along its lines. But it will not work. Then this will lead to inflation because of excess demand. Then what happens is that in open economies such as Ghana and Nigeria, the citizens being hungry will then change some of the money into foreign currencies and then do import, and this will lead to currency depreciation. Now we have double drop, high inflation and high currency depreciation. And then the central banks in these poor countries do not know what to do except to increase interest rates, so that expecting the interest rate to work on the downward shift of the inflation and of the currency depreciation. But this won't work because all poor countries are small multi-employment, open economies with low incomes and imperfect capital mobility. So high interest rate will not invite foreigners to come and save. High interest rates will not even encourage domestic savings because there are no incomes. And when that happens, all these poor countries end up with what I call wicked trinity: high inflation, high interest rates, and high currency depreciation. This is because all poor countries are trapped in Keynesian economics. Keynesian economics is the problem. Please abandon Keynesian economics. Once again, let's go back to school. You remember when we were in school, we were taught that developing countries such as Ghana, Nigeria, and the rest, all poor countries, do not have Keynesian type of unemployment. So why are we pursuing Keynesian economics? Keynesian economics cannot solve the unemployment problems in developing countries. Now let me tell you what Keynesian unemployment is. Keynesian unemployment is the type of unemployment that can be solved just by increasing the aggregate demand side of the economy. This is because there must be productive capacity. So when they tell you that you don't have Keynesian type of unemployment, all that they are saying is that you do not have productive capacity. Therefore, let us abandon Keynesian economics completely. Secondly, another issue that has been sold to all poor countries is that it has been sold by the advanced countries to the poor countries is that private sector is the engine of growth. Please, that is a lie. Private sector can never be the engine of growth. Private sector is a good manager of growth, but what happens is that it is the public sector that is the real engine of growth. If you are a country, you want to grow your economy, use the public sector because public sector is the engine of growth. And after you are able to grow your economy, hand it over to the private sector to run because private sector is a good manager of growth. Why do I say that private sector is not an engine of growth? Because in poor countries, we do not have capital. The kind of capital that is needed to violently shift the aggregate supply function outwards in order to develop cannot be accumulated by the private sector because savings are low, and it's because incomes are low, and it's because there are no jobs. Please, government in poor countries, treat the private sector as the manager of growth and treat the public sector as the engine of growth. After abandoning the Keynesian economics, what do? We go back to the classical economic system. Remember, these rich countries, UK, Germany, Canada, and the rest, they all developed using the classical economic system. They were all developing during the classical economic system. Now, by the time Keynesian introduced his economics, they were already developed. So these rich countries did not develop with Keynesian economics. So please, do not also develop with Keynesian economics. When I say we should pursue classical economics, this is what I mean. We should shift the aggregate supply function. We should keep shifting the aggregate supply function. We should keep shifting the aggregate supply function. What do I mean by that? We should create jobs. Jobs will create the incomes. Income is the same as economic growth. Sustained economic growth is economic development. I am repeating. Create the jobs. Jobs will create the incomes. Income is the same as growth. Sustained and persistent economic growth is the same as economic development. Now, here, this is what I suggest. I suggest two models: workers' economic system and dual sector internal asymmetric model. The government is going to come in. The government is going to print money. The government is going to print money to employ workers. These workers will work on the farm. The farm will be owned by the government, but the government will later sell the farm to the workers. The government will print money, set up the factories. These factories will be owned by the government. Then, after paying the workers will now buy the factories. The government will print money, build houses. Then the houses will be owned by the government. Later, the houses will be sold. So for workers' economic system, we are talking about a situation where the government develops the economy, the public sector, the engine of growth, develops the economy and hands it over gradually to the private sector through the workers. So the government starts the company and then sells the company to the workers. Then when we talk of the second model, the dual sector internal asymmetric model, dual means two: private sector and public sector. Now, the internal means that the problems in the poor countries are problems within poor countries. These problems have nothing to do with advanced countries. They are about the internal mechanisms within the poor countries. This is what happens. The asymmetry stems from the fact that what the private sector can do well, the public sector cannot do well. And what the public sector can do well, the private sector cannot do well. Now let me tell you what the public sector can do well. The public sector, the government, can within a short period of time accumulate huge capital to employ people, start farms, start companies and so on. That's what the public sector can do well. And what the private sector can do well is also to run these farms, the factories and so efficiently. Now the government will then offload these companies, these farms, these factories at the stock exchange so that anybody that has money can buy. So the difference between workers' economic system and dual sector internal asymmetric model is that for workers' economic system, the companies, the farms and the factories are sold to the workers. But for the dual sector internal asymmetric model, it can be sold to anybody that has money. As the author of the model, this is what I suggest, that the stock exchange must be decentralized. We should have stock exchange branches at the regional level, at the district level, at the constituency level, and even within every factory, within every company, within every farm set up by the government. There should be a stock exchange office there, because we are going to sell these to the workers, and the workers are all over the country. So stock exchange branches should be everywhere so that the workers can walk in and buy shares of these factories and of these companies. Even though the government is going to sell the shares to these workers, some workers may also want to buy extra shares in other companies. That is the reason why the stock exchange must be decentralized. It will inculcate confidence in the workers. Let's come to the real development agenda. The revolutions. The development agenda must start with agricultural revolution phase 1. This is what I call food sufficiency revolution. Here I suggest that the government should print money, employ workers in developing countries. We have so many unemployed people walking around. Print money, employ them, send them to the farms. Now, these are the features of the crops that must be planted during the phase 1 agricultural revolution. The gestation period of these crops must not exceed 6 months. That is number 1. Now, plant only the staple crops, what the people will eat. That is number 2. Then plant import substitutes so that when you are food sufficient, you don't import any food from anywhere. Now, what do I mean by food sufficiency? If you estimate your local consumption and it is say for rice, it is say 100 tons, then what you do is your target productive capacity should be about 500 tons. So in this case, every year you have about 400 tons in excess. You can even export some if you want. Now, another feature about food sufficiency is that the government can print money, pay people who are not working, unemployment benefit, pay the disabled, pay the elderly, pay the single mothers, pay anybody in the country who doesn't have a job. These people will get all the money, then they will go to the market to go and buy food and still the prices of these foods will not increase, then you have achieved food sufficiency. I do not know well about other countries, but I know about Ghana and Nigeria. So Ghana and Nigeria, your phase one agricultural revolution, the crops will include pepper, tomatoes, rice, corn, wheat, millet, poultry, and all those stable foods and vegetables that the people in the country will need to survive. Do not import them from anywhere. Now, after you have achieved food sufficiency in the phase one agricultural revolution, then you come to phase two agricultural revolution. The features of phase two agricultural revolution should include crops whose gestation period can go beyond 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. Another feature is that you are targeting crops you are going to export. Another feature is that you are actually planting cash crops. In Ghana, we are talking about cocoa, we are talking about shea nuts, we are talking about cotton, we are talking about, we can plant coffee, we are talking about coffee. These are the features of phase two agricultural revolution product. After agricultural revolution, let's come to industrial revolution. Industrial revolution has been divided into 5. The first one is what I call key stage factories. When I talk about key stage factories, I mean steel factories, aluminum factories, rubber factories, glass factories, paper factories, brake factories, solar panels factories, and garment factories. There are 8. Now, when I talk about steel factories, I'm not talking about molding metals. I am talking about using manganese and zinc and iron ore, whatever, to manufacture your own metal. When I talk about paper factory, I'm talking about using timber to manufacture your own paper. Now, when we do these factories, these are the factories that will serve as a foundation that can give us the raw materials to embark on the real industrial revolution and construction revolutions. Revolution phase one, we must get these factories established by the government. That is the first step. Then secondly, for the industrial revolution phase two, we must now set up factories that can manufacture the output of agricultural revolution phase one. So if during the agricultural revolution phase one, we planted tomatoes, then in the industrial revolution phase two, there should be tomato factories. If during the agricultural revolution phase one, you planted rice, then in the industrial revolution phase two, there should be rice factories that can process the rice you have been planting. Now, let's go to the industrial revolution phase 3. Here you are going to set up factories that will process the output of agricultural revolution phase 2. So in Ghana, for example, if in the agricultural revolution phase 2, we planted cocoa, then in the industrial revolution phase 3, we must now set up factories that will process the cocoa. If we planted cotton, then we must set up factories that will convert the cotton into garment and so on. Then we go to industrial revolution phase 4, where we are going to set up factories that will manufacture household appliances and then electronics. Then when we go to industrial revolution phase 5, we set up factories that will then manufacture cars and other machines. Then when we come to construction revolution phase 1, we talk about roads. The government in all countries have been building roads all the time. But in this case, we are talking about massive roads and drainage system. All the time, the government must print money to build these roads. That is the construction phase 1. Now, for the construction phase 2, the government must build houses, skyscrapers, story buildings, high-rise buildings, and rent them out on mortgage basis to these workers. For construction revolution phase 3, the government must now build railway network across the length and breadth of this country, or of the government's country, whichever poor country the government might find himself or herself. Now, please, I will not talk much about railway network because I have put this in a book I will call Africa Must Unite 2. The subtitle is United Countries of Africa. And also there's another book where I have explained that Africans must stop wearing second-hand clothes. That is why we must set up garment factories during the industrial revolution phase 1. And I have put that one too in a book I will call Neocolonialism 2. The subtitle is Decolonizing from Price suggest a metric of development. This is what I suggest, that the first stage of agricultural revolution should be tied in with the first stage of industrial revolution. Then the second stage of agricultural revolution should be tied in with the second stage of industrial revolution, and so on and so forth. Countries have the right to choose their own mix. At the end of this development agenda, that is after a few years of pursuing this development agenda, a Kayaye in Ghana or a Kuli in India will be able to have a decent job, own some shares in a decent company, and after that own his or her own accommodation. That is what we are talking about here. We are now going to discuss our fears. When we print our own money to pursue rapid economic growth and development, are we going to run into inflations and hyperinflations and so on, as has been sold to us by the monetaries and so on? Look at the diagram on the screen. The diagram on the screen shows the economy's productive capacity. A1, A2 shows the actual economy's productive capacity. That is, the various goods and services the economy can produce, given all the resources and labor and so on and so forth. R1, R2 shows the economy's productive capacity that is required to sustain the economy's consumption equilibrium. The indifference curve, IC, is the economy's consumption, and then the budget line BL is the economy's price system. The point R is the consumption equilibrium, which implies that the amount of goods and services that are required, the volume of goods and services that are required, the tons of goods and services that are required to sustain the economy's consumption equilibrium can be attained at point R. However, the economy's actual productive capacity, the supply, is at point A. So between point A and R, we have excess supply. So the economy produces at point A. However, the economy is only consuming at point R. When we have excess supply to this extent, no amount of monetary expansion can lead to inflation. Now, I try to keep this analysis very simple and easy. I did not use any mathematical models and so on in this workers' economic system model. Perhaps the only area that is a little bit mathematical is when I use Keynesian framework to show that in poor countries, a huge chunk of aggregate supply function is made up of imports. When I talk about the economy's budget line, I am referring to the price system. Please do not tamper with the price system. Workers' economic system must work in a free market economy. That is, the government of various countries that intend to implement workers' economic system must not control prices. If you produce enough and you have excess supply, the price will fall and you have low inflation. Do not tamper with the price system. There are many of you who may wonder if such an equilibrium R exists. Yes, I insist that the equilibrium R in relation to the actual productive capacity A exists. The equilibrium may not be unique, but it will exist for all poor countries that decide to seek for it. Pursue classical economic system, pursue classical economic ideas, implement workers' economic system, go through the revolutions. At each stage of the revolution, ensure that there is excess supply, the equilibrium exists, search for it. Once again, abandon Keynesian economics. It is cosmetic. It is only useful during recessions and economic depressions. Keynesian economics can only be used to even out recessions and economic depressions. It can never be used to create productive capacity. So abandon it. Is like a lady, a very beautiful lady who has pimples all over her face or her body. She goes to the cosmetic shop, applies the chemicals, and she's fine. But the chemicals cannot enhance any part of her actual or real body. This applies to the developed world. where they have productive capacity during recession, they apply Keynesian economics, it works for them. In poor countries, it doesn't work because we don't even have the real body. In this analogy, economic recessions and depressions can be likened to pimples, and Keynesian economics can be likened to cosmetics. If the advanced countries run into recessions and depressions, that is when they get pimples all over their faces, they apply Keynesian economics. That is, they apply the chemicals and they are free. They are moved back to their previous state.
There is a famous statement by Milton Friedman that inflation is everywhere a monetary phenomenon. Please, this statement is short-sighted. Inflation is not a monetary phenomenon. If you have excess capacity, there is no way there will be inflation. If you have excess supply, there is no way there will be inflation. Inflation can only be caused by excess demand. So long as when you look at the diagram, we produce beyond what we are going to consume, no amount of monetary expansion can lead to inflation. If you read Milton Friedman's analysis carefully, there is even an inverse relationship between inflation and unemployment. That if you want to create jobs, there will be inflation. That is not true. It is possible to create jobs, reduce unemployment without running into inflation if you apply workers' economic system through the revolutions so that you can get excess supply. Now there's another one, central bank's loss function, developed by the new Keynesians. Please, this is also not true. What do you mean by loss function? Relationship between productivity and inflation. So if you want to produce, you are going to run into inflation. All these are defects of Keynesian economics. They are defective products from Keynesian economics. Inverse relationship between inflation and unemployment, that is the Phillips curve sold to us by Milton Friedman, and now the loss function being sold to us by the new Keynesian. These are all defects due to Keynesian economics. So please, believe that you can print your own money, pursue efficient monetary policy. I don't want to talk about optimal monetary policy because new Keynesians have developed optimal monetary policy, and that is also a negative relationship between inflation and productivity or unemployment. So I will talk about efficient monetary policy. You can pursue efficient monetary policy without running into inflation. Now, let's talk about Kagan. I've read several books on Kagan. I've read several books and literature on hyperinflation and inflations. And the whole world will agree, or up to now, they agree that the best model on inflation and hyperinflation is that of Kagan, 1956. But Kagan based his analysis on expected inflation. I'm not going to argue with him, though I differ in opinion. As far as I am concerned, the only cause of inflation is excess demand. In this case, the only cause of expected inflation will be expected excess demand. That is expected to increase in magnitude. You see, so long as we keep excess supply in agriculture, during the agricultural revolution, we keep excess supply. During industrial revolution, we keep excess supply. During construction revolution, no amount of monetary expansion can lead to inflation. Now let me tell you something about more defective ways of Keynesian economics. Central bank independence, monetary policy credibility, and commitment to low inflation. Go to all poor countries in the world, they will tell you that the central bank's main objective is commitment to low inflation, because they know that if they allow the executive to print money, they will only embark on Keynesian economics, shift the aggregate demand, and there will be inflation. Now, policymakers, central banks, I advise you, allow your executive to print money so that they can tackle the aggregate supply. Let them expand supply. The best way to keep low inflation is to keep excess supply, not to constrict demand. As I come to the end of my lecture, please, let's talk about how to plan the revolution. Don't just get up and print your money. Plan, use 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, whatever number of years you think you must sit down to plan, so that when you start printing your own money to develop, you don't run into excessive problems. This is what I suggest. If you are a country in the planning process, please put all your economies, the first ones
together. All your agriculture economists, the best ones to sit together. Put all your agriculture economists, the best ones together. Put all the industrialists, the best ones together. Put all the experts together and let them think. Tell them you want to print your own money to finance development. So they should think about it. If they cannot come out with any procedure, if they tell you they cannot implement workers' economic system, don't be angry. Know that all IQs are not the same. Let them go. Employ foreigners, experts from outside. Let them come into your country and then plan for you and help you to print your own money to develop. After that, pay them and let them go. When you put your experts together, these are some of the things they must think about. You have fertile lands, you have fertilizers. Where are you going to get irrigation? Because you cannot rely on rainfall. You have raw materials and so on and so forth. These are the things your expert must think about for years. Put together. We are not going to rely on import to finance this development. You see, so your experts must think very carefully and analyze everything before they start. However, I have all these solutions in this book, Workers' Economic System and Other Models in Economics. For consultation, you just have to get the book and go through. The book will help you, the book will guide you as to how to print your own money to finance rapid economic growth and development. The second advice is that do not allow people with dual citizenship to come close to this development agenda. Anybody with double citizenship is a half citizen. If you hand over a development agenda to that person may even call the other country. After all, he is a citizen there too. As far as I am concerned, double citizenship or multiple citizenship is the future neo-colonialism or colonialism itself. This is what is going to happen. Very soon, people with double citizenship in poor countries are going to fight to go to parliament. Later they will become ministers. 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 100 years to come, we are going to get presidents in poor countries who will be who own double citizenship. So the president of Ghana will also be a citizen of, let's say, another country. The president of Kenya will also be a citizen of another country. The president of India will also be a citizen of another country. This will happen in all poor countries. Then later on, people who are citizens in other countries will then come to Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya and the rest to take another citizenship. Then they will contest election and then they will be sponsored by those people and then they will win and they will become leaders. In this case, what will then happen is that we are then back to colonialism. So double citizenship is the future colonialism, and I have put this in a book I will call Neo-Colonialism 2, Decolonizing Completely. So please do not allow people with multiple citizenship to come close to this development agenda. Period. Now, to conclude this lecture, this is what I want to say. Forget about the monetarists. Forget about the new Keynesians who say that when you print your money, you will run into inflation and hyperinflation. It can only happen when you print your money to expand the demand side of the economy. Now, let us print our money to expand the supply side of the economy. Let us pursue classical economic ideas. Let us use workers' economic system. Let us print money, create jobs, employ people, and increase economic activities in our various countries. And this is what will bring about the needed development. Use workers' economic system. Employ dual sector internal asymmetric model. Free yourself. Poor countries. My social media handle is @GroundNewD on Instagram, on Twitter, and on Facebook. I am a teacher. I teach mathematics and social studies at Jane Montessori School, J. Abo, Accra.
Teach yourself undergraduate microeconomics. Teach yourself undergraduate macroeconomics. Teach yourself mathematical economics for economics and business students. Teach yourself practical statistical economics for economics and business students. Teach yourself practical research methods for economics, business and social science students. Teach yourself composition for secondary and high schools, GCSE, UK. Teach yourself composition for secondary and high schools. NSC, South Africa. Teach yourself composition for secondary and high schools. KCSE, Kenya. Teach yourself composition for secondary and high schools. ICSE, ISC, AISSCE, India. Teach yourself composition for secondary and high schools. WASSCE, Nigeria. Teach yourself composition for secondary and high schools. International Cambridge Examinations, IGCSE. Teach yourself composition for secondary and high schools in Ghana. Over 3,500 questions and answers on the Cochrane, with 100 literary devices clearly explained. I call this book a magic book because it is virtually impossible for WAEC to set a question that is not already in this book. Workbook on over 3,500 questions and answers on the Cochrane. This book was made as a result of public request. Workers' economic system and other models in economics. Models on corruption economics and models on mathematical analysis.